Hi everyone, I'm Jo Sparrow, President of Jigsaw Queensland and host of Adopt Perspective podcast. Today's conversation is about what happens when the truth of your life is known by everyone except for you. Caroline Liesegang was adopted as a baby in Sydney in 1971, possibly adopted as late as 6 months of age. She grew up as the youngest of 4 children, all adopted into the same family. None of them were told they were adopted. Caroline discovered the truth at 27 years old, not through disclosure, but by accident, in a moment that revealed how many people had known all along. Even her husband at the time knew. This episode explores what that kind of secrecy does over time, to identity, to trust, to family relationships, and to the way adopted people understand themselves as adults. We talk about late discovery, the burden of being the truth teller, reunion without resolution, and the quiet loneliness of living with an experience that family and friends and society don't understand. Caroline's story doesn't offer a neat arc or a redemptive ending. What it offers instead is something rarer: honesty, complexity, and discussion about the decision to step back from relationships for a moment or for good when they cost too much. This is an episode about adoption as a lifelong experience, not a single event, and about the courage it takes to live with unanswered answers. I'm Jo Sparrow, and welcome to the episode, Caroline. How's it going?
Hi, Jo. I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Caroline, before we go anywhere near adoption, I'd love to start with you as you are now. Where are you in the world at the moment, and what does life look like for you today?
Yes, I'm currently living in Vietnam on a sabbatical with my husband of 23 years, and I have 2 young adult sons that are back at home in Australia, and I am enjoying a period of time off work and spending time to just relax. I think relax and enjoy a culture that I've always loved. But home for us is Cairns in Australia.
I'm a little jealous that you're in Vietnam. It's my
Mm.
favourite cuisine in the whole world. I keep thinking I'm going on a foodie trip over there. I hope to do that one day.
Yes, well, my biggest struggle these days is working out where to eat each day.
But I have such struggles.
It's such a struggle.
I've often found myself that distance, geographically or emotionally, can shape how I process or reflect on my life. How has it impacted you?
I think geographical distance has been a big part of my actual adoption process. Not long after I found out, I did move from Sydney to Brisbane. A few years later, from there, I've moved to Cairns, and currently I'm here. So I do feel like having some separation is healthy for me, to be able to step back, not be quite so impacted by things in your face, I guess. I also feel it gives me the choice of when I want to interact and how. I do get strangely possessive about my new spaces, which is something I've thought about, particularly like my hometown now, Cairns. I feel like it's mine and I want to keep it mine. I don't particularly want to share it with people from my past. I know that's a very strange thing.
And it's not strange to me. Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel that same way, even just about my house. It's kind of special to get invited into it, and I don't like the dirty drop in, and it's my safe
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like that very much, that, Cairns is my safe space, and I have left many things behind and I like to keep it just my area.
Caroline, you grew up as the youngest of 4 children, all adopted into the same family. When you think back on your childhood now, how would you describe the emotional atmosphere of that household?
The emotional atmosphere was, we had a happy childhood in a sense. I didn't feel any emotional distress. Both of my parents worked full time. My younger years, I don't have any great memory of at all, to be honest. My teenage years were a little bit turbulent, being a bit of a rebellious teenager. But I feel having older parents, as many adoptees do have, I was left very much to my own devices, I think, a lot of the time. I just went about my life, not being none the wiser really to a lot of things. I have one memory of when I was young that I was definitely searching for some kind of loving affirmation, which was not forthcoming. And so it was quite just a functional household. There wasn't a great deal of stress. My parents didn't argue. It wasn't an emotive household, but there wasn't really a lot of emotion, I guess, one way or another.
Yeah. What was spoken about openly in your family and what wasn't?
There's obviously a lot of wasn't. The conversations are generally just quite generic, I suppose. Food, work, daily activities. I don't believe there were a lot of intense conversations. We had quite a lot of relatives. When relatives were around, there was, swimming, eating, but nothing serious. There were no real serious conversations.
One of the most striking parts of your story, of course, is that none of you were told that you're adopted, and yet everyone else in your family knew. When you look back now, what do you think that level of secrecy did to you and your siblings even before you knew the truth?
Well, I think it did a lot. I think the reason why there wasn't a lot of emotion or a lot of conversation or open communication is because there was this level of secrecy. So there was never an opportunity given to go into any depth of conversation or emotion. I think the knowing that everybody else knew was just bewildering. I just remember feeling completely bewildered. And as you said in the introduction, my husband at the time knew. We were only married for a short time. He was told via relatives. He'd known the whole time. And I guess slowly that realization sinking in that, your cousins or your aunties or all these people that you have spent time with in the years are all aware. And that takes a bit of time to to digest. It makes things a little bit more, makes sense of some things, perhaps like why there is a level of, protection from other people or my parents, I think, protecting that secret.
Yeah. Did you ever feel different without knowing why?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't really explain that either. So, I remember there being a few things like photographs in the house that I wasn't in. And as you mentioned, there was four of us and we were all adopted. Me being the youngest, there were these very old style photographs where the child is faded out into a background and all three of the siblings were there and I wasn't there. And I remember saying, why aren't I in that photo? And it's like, oh, you didn't have any teeth, or just these really obscure answers that didn't really seem to make sense. I always felt like there was something not quite right.
Yeah. So you found out that you're adopted at around the age of 27.
Mm.
In a moment that sounds almost accidental, like a joke, a look on your cousin's face. Can you take us back to that moment and tell us about it?
Yeah, so it was just my cousin and I. We were having lunch, and I can't recall how we got onto the conversation, but I did just make a joke like, "Oh, I think maybe I might be adopted in the way that maybe my behavior was different to others or something along that line." And my cousin just sort of looked at me with shock as if she knows. And then I'm like, "Oh, I know. What do I know?" And then it just sort of spilled from there. And then I went home, and as you said, I spoke to my husband about it, who then told me that he knew. So then it was just this slow process of digesting that information and trying to work out, what to do with it.
What happened inside you when you realized that something fundamental had just shifted?
Oh, I think it is a really slow process to actually understand everything. Like at first it's kind of almost a bit humorous or a bit like strange or what's going on or, it's okay or trying to, settle it in your mind. And then for me, I think it just took time for that shock to sink in and go, well, what does that mean? And how is that so? And why haven't been told? And everybody else knowing, like it takes time because it's not something you've ever really thought of happening in your life. So it takes a long time to think about that and think about what that means and how that's affected you.
Yeah. I've heard late discovery adoptees saying that they had like initial shock, then some clarity, things started to make
Mm.
sense that didn't make sense, betrayal, like intense feelings of betrayal and
Huge amount of
confusion.
betrayal. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm cranky. I'm still cranky, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your body react before your mind caught up, do you feel?
Yeah, I think so. I probably even, sort of showed some signs of kind of like, oh, wow, very light-hearted, humorous response or something that, definitely is not what I feel or felt. And just felt shock. I mean, I remember then discussing it with my husband at the time, and he sort of gave a bit of clarity because, of course, he knew knew more than I did. about the situation, and he knew that my other brothers and sisters were adopted, so he could provide me with some background information. And then we not long after that separated. So which may or may not have been joined together, I don't know. And so it was sort of just something that then I sat with for, quite a while before deciding what to do with it, I guess.
Yeah. Did it change how safe you felt in relationships and alter how you understood trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I recognized that at the time, but yeah, if I take time to reflect on myself, I definitely have issues with trust. I mean, I've been married now for 23 years. I've got a loving husband and 2 kids, and I keep my unit very small. I feel like I'm always concerned that there's something else going on behind everything, that there's that not everything is as it seems. So I can be quite cautious, I think, with other people and having other relationships.
Yeah. So you then carried the weight of telling your
Mm,
brothers and sister.
mm.
What was it like to be the bearer of that truth, especially knowing that it would change things forever for them?
Definitely didn't go to plan, that's for sure. I sat with her for quite a while, and then I talked to my sister, who's 2 years my elder, and she was on approaching getting married herself. And I spoke to them about it, and the feedback, the response I got was, yeah, not as planned. They were really just annoyed that I had disrupted what was happening in their lives. I think they went away and thought about it, and then came back and said, "Oh, look, it's not true. We've looked at it. It's not true. We've got the birth certificate." And I'm like, I know, but your birth certificate is not, it's not your original birth certificate. And they really just didn't want to hear about it. And they were sort of they were cranky, they were annoyed by the disruption. So at that point, I was like, okay, I think I'm just going to travel my path and you travel your path, and we'll both manage it in our own way. My brothers were a little bit different. Eldest brother, he, I think, had some idea himself through similar circumstances, but he wasn't sure. So I think he had heard some rumors through cousins and things. So when I did talk to him about it, he was obviously much more receptive, and is like, okay, so that is the case. And so that was an easy conversation with him to have. However, I think at that time he may have been estranged from mum and dad. So maybe that also provided some clarity for him, why things weren't going according to plan in their relationship as well.
Yeah. What about your other brother?
My other brother, he was his response was more, I don't care, I don't want to know, mum and dad are mum and dad, and that's that. And it's never really changed from that, I believe. We are estranged from each other now due to many things that have happened in the last, 2 decades. And uh, that's a shame. So it's not something that we've continued to talk about. I don't know how it affects his life. He also lives further away from where my parents lived and where we live. I'm sure it does affect his life silently, but it's not something that we converse about.
Yeah. So it was a full year before you spoke to your adoptive parents about
Mm,
this. When
yeah.
you eventually spoke with them, it sounds like the conversation was brief and then never revisited.
I was terrified.
I can imagine.
Was absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
The fear of asking, I look back on that and I don't really understand, why was I so scared to ask? Why? But I was terrified. I had moved away. I'd moved to Brisbane. I came home for a weekend, and all weekend I'm like trying to rev myself up. Go and ask mum, go and ask mum, go and ask mum. And I think it was like the last hours that I was there before I had to go back to the airport. I was in the shower and I came out. I would have been absolutely blubbering, I think. And I said, "Mum, I've heard that I'm adopted. Is it true?" And the response was very brisk and said, "Yes, it is. You know it is. Your cousin told you." So I'm like,
So she'd
okay.
heard, right.
So she'd heard. At that
Yeah.
time, I probably didn't, process that comment so much. But afterwards, it was like, oh my God.
She'd heard for a
You
year.
knew, I knew, and you didn't help. You didn't help me. You didn't come and help me. You didn't approach me. You didn't. Yeah. So that, I find that quite troubling. Mm.
It's a lot to process, isn't it?
And then after that, the words were just, it was nothing untoward, very old fashioned speak. As I said, my parents are elderly and they have both passed away now. It was nothing untoward. And I think I don't think she was trying to be unkind. I think she wanted to make it just really simple, just simple, And we never told you because we didn't want you to feel any different. That was the sum of that conversation. Wish that she could have elaborated on that story about maybe why, how that came about how I was chosen, about how she felt having me. Something I think to make it personal, perhaps, about me. Just, my children know all about, their lives and coming into my lives and their behaviours and how it all felt and the emotions. And I feel like I don't have a story. So it would have been really nice to hear a story about, where I was and what it was like when they first saw me or met me, or, almost even I've heard in other podcasts and other guests of yours that there was a dialogue that many parents were given. And, sometimes think even that would have been nice, perhaps, just something to make it feel personal.
So is there any acknowledgement of maybe it wasn't the best way to go, or an apology?
None. Never. And in the future, that was never the case either. I mean, we had, after that point in time, and at that point, I had that discussion with my parents, but nobody else none of my other siblings have had a discussion with my parents. So openly, it was, as far as they were aware, it was only me that was aware of the adoption of all of us. And, we sat through many dinners I remember one in particular, my sister talking about the hereditary nature of giving birth and the similarities, with mum. And I'm just like sitting there thinking, this is just all bollocks. And mum's just like, pass the salt. My husband, my now husband's just sitting there going, this is just ridiculous. So there just was never a point where they saw fit to go, okay, maybe we need to have a family meeting. And I try to understand the difficult situation they were in, and perhaps very much of the time how they were maybe encouraged or chosen to manage it. I don't know, but I definitely feel some anger towards that. It's like, at what point did you think maybe let's look after the emotional well-being of these children and put that as a priority?
You said that after your adoptive parents died, the family essentially fell apart. Do you see any connection between that secrecy around adoption and the fractures that emerged later?
A huge amount. So over it's really just been in the last just less than 2 decades, the children all found out that they were adopted and managed it in their different ways. My sister chose not to believe that she was adopted for quite a long period of time. Another conversation that I did have with my parents some years later was that my sister doesn't know she's adopted and we don't want you to tell her. And my response was, I don't think that's my job to tell her anyway. I think it's your job to tell her. But that conversation never came about between the two of them. And so I think, and this is of course just my perspective, I do know it is one shared by my brothers, but everything was done to protect that bubble from my sister. And so there was a lot of secrecy and I guess, favoritisms in different behaviors. Myself and my two brothers, we all moved away from Sydney and my sister remained. So I think it was just a bubble that my parents wanted to remain in and just remain safe, and they would protect that at, whatever cost. Like even like the cousin that told me accidentally was outcast from the family, which I didn't know at the time, but, found out later as a response to accidentally giving me that information. So it was very much, if you didn't keep the bubble, if you didn't keep the story, what they considered to be their truth, then you just pushed out, so you couldn't destroy anything. That's how it felt, as I said, my perspective.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like protecting this bubble, and the bubble was not a protected space in the end. The bubble ended up being the harmful part, and it all burst anyway.
Yeah. And my sister did end up finding out the truth, and we had conversations about that, and she was very hurt. I don't really understand how she didn't believe it the first time, but however it came about to her the second time, she was really troubled by it. know it affected her relationship with mum and dad, although she never spoke to them about it. She never let them know that she was aware of the situation. So there was just so many layers of like lies and secrecy and nobody speaking honestly or talking openly. And I feel like that just made the whole family disintegrate, separate, move away. Everyone was hurt and I think managing it in their own different ways. And by the time, there were other things involved, like after my mother died, there was, some family financial problems and things like that all combined. And yeah, in the end, it is no longer existent, which makes me feel really sad. Yeah, it makes me feel very sad. But also it didn't have to be that way. And that's, something that I think, gosh, it just didn't have to be like that. It could have been so good. It could have been such a good story.
So many adopted people say that becoming a parent reactivates their questions around identity and origins. What shifted for you when you had your first child?
Yeah. And so when I became pregnant with my first child, Oliver, I was in my early 30s. And I was like, wow, this is my first biological relative. This baby inside me is my first person, mine. And, that was really important to me. I was curious about that and excited about that. But it definitely brought up that, I felt quite alone, I guess. I'm sort of very alone in this world. That's, now I'm going to have somebody of my own. And in the years that followed, I had another child and I guess you get very busy raising two children and trying to live your life that many other things just have to go on the back burner, both time-wise and so it wasn't until some years later that I then felt the need to reach out and try and find I still put a lot of emphasis on my children and my, that we're it. It's us. It's us. It's our little, our little cube, and we have to stick together. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that is impacted by my past. Yeah.
So you eventually found and met your biological family. Can you step us through that search and what you discovered?
So I searched through the processes that are recommended on the websites. I think I used the Benevolent Society, and I wrote a letter to two people in Sydney that could have possibly been. And it didn't take very long, and I had a response from my birth mother. And she was living in Sydney, not far really from where I grew up, and had three other children to my birth father. So they obviously adopted me out, but remained together, then got married and had three other children. So I have three full-blooded siblings. And that was very exciting. The communication was informative and not distressing. And we resolved that we would meet. So I had two young children at the time. I honestly can't remember their names exactly. And we flew down to Sydney and we met my birth mother and we went to her home. And I think I just remember thinking about that TV show, Find My Family.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. So we walked into that home and just my mother was there at the time. And so we could just meet each other and take a little bit to get to know each other before her other children came into the home, and we spent the afternoon, had a barbecue and all getting to know each other. And that was, my parents were still alive at the time and not something that I shared with.
Yeah. I've talked to other adopted people whose parents went on to have other children after they were placed for adoption. And I get the sense that it amplifies the feeling of, while you're connected, also being very separate, because you see, it amplifies, I guess, the family culture that you can see that you don't feel quite a part of. What was it like for you stepping into that family, knowing that you're both connected and separate?
It was overwhelming because there was a lot of them. There was my mother and birth mother and the three siblings, and the siblings all had partners and children. So there was a lot of people there. I loved it. I loved it. I loved, I loved being with them. They are very much like me. It was like, oh, these are my people. And, particularly my siblings, I have a sister who is 9 years my junior, but, our husbands would get along very well, and they go, oh my gosh, look at them. We're very similar in our thoughts and the way we behave, our characteristics, how we talk. So I really enjoyed that, having somebody that I felt was mine or was similar to me. But as you said, they had an upbringing and a family, and they're a very tight-knit family. The siblings and the mother are very tight-knit. And so it was, I guess there is an element of that's them over there and I'm over here. And I remember reading something years ago in some adoption resources about it can look with reunions, it's like you're looking at a piece of pie, but you're only allowed a slice of it. And I think that's what it felt like after some period of time. It was like there's a whole pie sitting there that they all get to enjoy, but I feel like I'm only allowed to have a slice of it. You had to sort of be quite cautious, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, the crossover in size and structure of both your biological and adoptive families is really quite uncanny. I
Yeah,
mean, so you're
bizarre.
the oldest in your biological family of four and the youngest in your adoptive family, and two boys, one and two girls, all of that. Did you feel like you belonged anywhere?
Well, obviously not really, no. I mean, I really felt like I had, and I still do have, heart connection with my biological siblings, without a doubt. And, the way I guess that's progressed, which has been my choice, is something that is also perhaps just sad due to, circumstances, and may or may not stay that way. It may change in the future. I don't think I ever want to put definites on anything. I feel that I could have been very connected to them, but yeah, we've we've got different perspectives and different concerns.
Yeah. I mean, reunions are rarely linear and they're very complicated
Mm,
relationships to piece together. I've
mm,
met very few people where it's just all been one straight trajectory upwards.
mm,
And you've described your relationship with your biological mother as complex with push and pull over the time, which I
yeah.
know every adoptee listening is going to go, oh, yeah, I know what that feels like.
Mm,
How do you
mm.
make sense of that relationship now?
I I try not to be honest. I just
Yeah.
have put it away. Yeah, I've just put it away. I don't really understand it. I feel sad about it, confused by it. I think the push and pull may just be, as you say, it's just so complex. And I feel like I have often, particularly with my birth mother, was probably far too fearful to say exactly what I thought I wanted or needed. That fear of rejection is just so embedded in us or in me. I couldn't say, look, I really feel this or I really feel that. Do you remember like writing a letter? And I just felt like sometimes she was in and then just wanted out, and there were quite clear segregations made with her communication and connection that were showing me that I wasn't allowed in. And for me that was just heartbreaking. I just couldn't manage. I felt like I was just getting broken every time that I went into that relationship, and was crying a lot. And, in the end, I think I just had to manage myself and my boys and my job and my marriage and all those other things. So hence, why I stepped away. I forgot the question now, Joe.
I think you answered it. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
by extension, stepping away from the relationship with your mother also meant stepping away from the relationship with your siblings. Is that right?
Yeah. As I said, they're close, and particularly my birth sister, and we were really close, and I never even really spoke to her about me stepping away. But I feel like it was just getting to a point where, there were words used like that my expectations were too high or things like that were making me feel like, are they? I don't know, and then just making me question myself and think, well, why aren't I allowed to? And I just felt so hurt that I just couldn't manage to go there anymore. I did provide some clarity to one of my birth brothers about why I was stepping away, and he was very kind. And the dialogue has always been there that we'll always be here. And, whenever you want to come back, like we're here. My birth sister has reached out to me a few times via text when she was coming to Cairns for another reason. It's like, do you want to catch up? And I'm like, I think we had so many things go through, like when my parents were passing and all the drama. I just can't really deal with maybe the emotions that are going to come up if I go down that path again. And I'm fearful of that. I think I'm quite fearful of that. And my birth family are very close together, so it would be very difficult to have a relationship with one and not the other, or the children, not the mother. They are a very tight-knit family, and as they should be. So I think it's very much for my own protection that I have just stepped away and I just put it to the side.
Yeah. You've maintained contact with your biological father, and you described that relationship as simpler. Where did he fit in with when you reunited with the rest of the family? Was he there from right on the onset of that, or?
No, so he wasn't there at the initial meeting. He lives in a regional part of Queensland, but he was advised, and then we spoke on the phone. I think generally because they also split up, they have issues as well with regard to their divorce and how their children manage that divorce, etc., etc. But for him, his outlook was, "Oh, you're gone and you're back, and isn't that great?" And there's no real emotional stress attached to him. He's not confusing. We only, see or talk to each other, on the phone throughout the year. It's not like we have a extraordinarily close relationship where we, visit or spend a lot of time together. But we, I guess, care about each other, and they check in how I'm doing. I check in how they're doing. They have visited, we have visited, and it's just not complicated in the sense of I don't feel any emotional complication from him. But he's, that's the type of personality that he is. But he also maybe, as I said, they had their own complications with their marriage and divorce, and he stepped away, I think geographically wise, they lived in a different part. So has not been as close to his children as maybe he would have liked, and they're just different circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've said that very few people truly understand how complicated late discovery adoption and reunion can be. What do you wish the wider world understood about this experience?
I think it's just maybe difficult to understand how alone somebody perhaps can feel. Like if you look at somebody that's from an outside perspective, and everybody's got their issues, but from an outside perspective, if you look at a lot of families, again, not all of them, obviously, there is this, it feels safe, or it looks safe, like it's always going to be there, or even me with my own children, I know that, it's very safe. It's like till the end, you're going to have each other's back kind of thing. Whereas I feel like with this late adoption that the secrecy and the betrayal and makes you feel I am so on my own out here, like you really are separated from everybody. And I feel like if you're not in that circumstance, how would one understand it?
Yeah. Yes, it's definitely an additional layer of complication on the adoption experience generally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think many people are like, but isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? They adopted 4 people, or isn't that, was it a good life? You had a good life, or really simplify it. And then nobody wants to sound like a whinger or a victim or anything like that. So it's just like, oh, yeah.
And people say, I know heaps of adopted people and they're
Yeah.
happy. They never say anything bad. It's like, we
Yeah.
don't say it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we
Yeah.
don't feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
it's just, I think, a feeling of, I feel sort of unique. I feel different. I guess I feel different, and it's a really interesting story. It's one that I am getting a bit tired of myself, if that can make any sense. Like, I'm getting weary of it. I think as I get older, I'm getting weary of it. And as you said, it's not linear. It's over decades. It keeps going and going, and the emotions come and they go and they change. It is always there, which is something that is a little bit surprising, that it just keeps going. But I feel weary of it sometimes. Like, I don't want it to be everything, about me. I'm just trying to live a good, happy, fulfilling life. And at the moment, obviously, I'm having a grand time, but without having a contact with the birth family and the adoptive family falling apart, it's like, uh, as I move through life, I do feel very much alone. I have my husband, of course, and we have a good, healthy relationship, a very open one. He's probably he's been with me the majority of the way through this path, so he's got the best understanding probably from anyone else in the outside world. But yeah, it's quite solitary.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying about getting weary of it. One of my favorite movies is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. And very loosely, it involves this procedure that can be done that can erase something or someone from your memory.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes I've flirted with the idea of, geez, I wish I could just
Yeah.
erase adoption and every aspect of it from
Yeah.
my memory. But the problem is your body remembers,
Yeah. It is. It's just like, yeah, it's a tiring emotion to have, and it's one that, a lot of the emotions that it brings up. I think my birth father didn't really understand why I had separated contact from the rest of the family, and I said, I tried to give him some context to some situations, that made me feel like I did. I said, but all of these things combined, they just make me feel resentment and anger and jealousy and a whole lot of emotions that I don't want to feel. I don't want to be sitting in them. I don't want to be those things. And so I feel like I work really hard to not be that. Yeah, to not do that.
Caroline, thank you so much for being with us today. Your story and your honesty and the way that you've shared it will stay with many of us long after this conversation ends, I'm sure. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And remember that every adoption experience is different and every story matters. If you'd like to support the podcast, subscribe and share episodes. And if you'd like to share your own story on the Adopt Perspective podcast, you can go to the Jigsaw Queensland website, find the podcast tab, scroll down and you'll find a prospective guest form there that you can fill in and send through. I'm Jo Sparrow, President of Jigsaw Queensland. Take care and bye for now.